Mark chapter 6, verses 14 to 29. King Herod heard about this, for Jesus' name had become well known. Some were saying, John the Baptist had been raised from the dead, and that is why miraculous powers are at work. Others said, he is Elijah. And still others claimed, he is a prophet like one of the prophets of long ago. But when Herod heard this, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised from the dead. For Herod himself had given orders to have John arrested, and had him bound and put in prison. He did this because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, whom he had married. For John had been saying to Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. So Herodias nursed a grudge against John and wanted him killed. But she was not able to, because Herod feared John and protected him, knowing him to be a righteous and holy man. When Herod heard John, he was greatly puzzled, yet he liked to listen to him. Finally, the opportunity came. On his birthday, Herod gave a banquet for his high officials and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee. When the daughter of Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his dinner guests. The king said to the girl, ask me for anything you want, and I'll give it to you. And he promised her with an oath, whatever you want, I'll give to you, up to half my kingdom. She went out and said to her mother, what shall I ask for? The head of John the Baptist, she answered. At once the girl hurried to the king with a request, I want you to give me, right now, the head of John the Baptist on a platter. The king was greatly distressed, but because of his oath and his dinner guests, he did not want to refuse her. So he immediately sent an executioner with orders to bring John's head. The men went, beheaded John in his prison, and brought back the head on a platter. He presented it to the girl, and she gave it to her mother. On hearing this, John's disciples came and took his body and laid it in a tomb.
Hey, Ben.
Yep, Bernie?
You must love hanging out with me.
I must love hanging out with you.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Well, no, I do love hanging out with you because you know what, Bernie?
What's that?
You're pretty fun. You tell some funny jokes. You do some funny things. I really enjoy hanging out with you.
No, that's not what I meant.
What did you mean? I must have fun hanging out with you.
Well, you know how I am super cool and everybody loves me?
Yes.
Well, you're not that cool.
Oh, thanks, Bernie.
But because you hang out with me, everybody thinks you're cool, and now you probably get more friends.
So sorry, what you're saying is because I hang out with you,
yeah,
everyone thinks I'm cool like you.
Because I'm the coolest.
Because you're the coolest, and that means I'll get more friends.
Yeah, that's the real reason you like hanging out with me. And you know what?
What, Bernie?
I bet Jesus' friends liked hanging out with him because he was the best and everyone wanted to be his friend.
Well, no, Jesus is the best. That part is true. But sadly, not everyone wanted to listen to Jesus, and not everyone wants to live God's way.
What do you mean?
Well, Bernie, remember John the Baptist?
Oh yeah, he was a crazy looking guy. He looked a bit like you.
Well, he was the crazy looking guy. Probably didn't look like me. I look pretty cool.
No, you don't.
Well, no, anyway, John the Baptist, he was the one that was getting everybody ready for Jesus.
Yeah, I knew that. What about him?
Well, he was a friend with Jesus, and he's someone who lived God's way, but things didn't turn out that good for him.
What do you mean?
Well, John the Baptist, he got the king really angry.
You shouldn't get the king angry. He is so powerful.
The king is pretty powerful, but John the Baptist got the king angry because he was saying, you know what, king? His name was Herod. You're doing the wrong thing. You're not listening to God, and you're not living God's way.
What did the king do?
Well, the king didn't like that, so the king had John arrested.
Oh man, that's not very cool.
That's not very cool, but that's not all that happened to John.
What else happened to John?
Well, unfortunately, because John kept living God's way, he got himself killed.
What do you mean?
Well, John kept living God's way, and then the king's wife didn't like it, and then one day she said, I want you to kill John, and the king killed John.
Oh man, so you're telling me that if I live God's way, people might not like me and they might kill me?
Well, that is true. If you live God's way, not everybody loves living God's way. Some people don't want to live God's way, and sometimes they make it hard for people to live God's way.
Then I'm not going to do it.
Well, that's a pretty silly thing to say, Bernie, because God is actually stronger than anybody else. And even though we might get in trouble for living God's way, the Bible tells us living God's way is the best way, and God sees all. And in the end, that's the only way to live. So even though it might be hard, living God's way is the best way. It's the way we should all live. And I'm going to pray and ask God to help us live his way.
Okay.
Dear God, thank you that your way is the best way. Thank you that we know all about your way because you tell us in the Bible. Help us to be people like John who live your way even when it's really hard. Help us not to worry when people tease us for living your way, but to always live your way. Amen.
Amen. But Ben,
Yep.
I still think you like hanging out with me
Yep.
because it makes you get a lot more friends. Ha! Because you're not very cool.
Well, thanks for that, Bernie. I like hanging out with you because you're fun, but maybe I get more friends because of it too. But remember, the best way to live
Here's Bernie's way.
is not Bernie's way. The best way to live is always God's way. Catch you around.
See you tomorrow.